Yeah, it shows just how much this has become a cause celeb in the United States. Guy, of course, Anthony Blinken and Lloyd Austin going, and now Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House. Yes, from the same political party as the American president, but I think still expressing how much there is a bipartisan consensus behind American policy towards Ukraine. You saw that in the vote in the House of Representatives on upping the aid to Ukraine and just how important an issue this has become in U.S. politics. How important is it? And as a practical level, not that important. How important is it as a symbolic level? Important, again, an additional visit in the long line of visits that President Zelensky has received from U.S. officials, from other Western officials. Again, Joe is showing just how much the Ukrainians are benefiting from their success on the battlefield, right? Success begets success. And even at the beginning of the war, Guy, in Washington, and for that matter, here in Jerusalem, there was some nervousness about going too far in supporting the Ukrainians, going too far in confronting the Russians, because the assumption was the Russians were going to win the war anyway, and that at some point there would have to be a reckoning with them. Now that conclusion is obviously brought into question, given what we've seen in the last 2 months and the success of the Ukrainians on the battlefield. This is seen as a good investment in Washington, and so the U.S. is investing more in it. In a sense, a kind of corrective, I think, psychologically and practically to the debacle in Afghanistan, right, where the U.S. spends $1 trillion only to see the entire army evaporate within days. Here, the exact opposite. A cautious investment at the beginning, but that's paid off on the battlefield, really incentivizing a much greater investment, both of resources and of rhetoric, and in terms of expanding the operations goals from the perspective of the United States. The visit by Nancy Pelosi and her delegation, just the latest symbol of Washington's commitment.
And we forgot to mention another symbolic visit, that of actress Angelina Jolie, who was spotted in Lviv in a coffee shop. And that's also significant, I think, for the world views of the presence, of the American presence of celebrities in Ukraine. We're almost 2.5 months into the Russian invasion. Give us a general picture of where we're heading with the Russian attack on eastern Ukraine. What's the situation in Kyiv, and what's next?
Another milestone slipping away. That's the first headline. It's now May 1st. Guy, itself a holiday in Russia, traditionally in the beginning of a holiday season. But of course, that's not the holiday the Russians had in mind. The holiday they had in mind as a milestone is May 9th, Victory Day, right? By all accounts, that's when Vladimir Putin wanted to be able to march in that parade through the streets of Moscow into Red Square and to present to his public a crowning achievement from the battlefield in Ukraine. It doesn't look like it's going to happen. Maybe he'll try to point to some kind of achievement and make some kind of speech to show some kind of progress. But a signal achievement seems to be slipping out of reach, and seems frankly not to, very quietly, not to have become a part, or to become not a part of Russian strategy, which seems to be more plotting, more and slower, more intentional, and less oriented towards meeting that specific deadline, maybe by necessity in eastern Ukraine. By all accounts, the Russians repeating a lot of their mistakes in the battle for Kyiv, which they lost in terms of the east. And I think an interesting lesson in terms of military strategy from this war is, if you're going to fight a conventional war, you have to win a conventional war, right? The Russians fighting this conventional World War II style war that we thought had gone from the world, right? Of marching tanks across the steppes of Eastern Europe to take territory. If you're going to do that, you have to win the war that way. You can't win the war by committing human rights, by committing wartime atrocities and very possibly war crimes in Mariupol and Bucha and Irpin and other places. You actually have to hit military objectives. You actually have to move forward on the ground. That's what the Russians have been unable to do.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, war has no winners, as we all know from history. Owen Alterman, thank you so much for your insight.